Morning, everyone. This is the 5th Ethical Revelation Fellowship. I'm Reverend Dr. Roger Paul, and this morning, is Sunday, October 12th, and we're going to just finish the second half of paper 140, and we're on section 6, page 1576, point 1, or paper 140, section 6.1 in the new book. The evening of the ordination. So let's say a little prayer and we'll get started here. Father, thank you for bringing us together this morning, and thank you for allowing us to study this wonderful revelation this morning that we might learn from you. We thank you and we give you the praise in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Millie, would you like to start us out this morning?
I'll do that. Number 6, the evening of the ordination. Sunday evening, on reaching the home of Zebedee from the highlands north of Capernaum, Jesus and the 12 partook of a simple meal. Afterwards, while Jesus went for a walk along the beach, the 12 talked among themselves. After a brief conference, while the twins built a small fire to give them warmth and more light, Andrew went out to find Jesus, and when he had overtaken him, he said, "Master, my brethren are unable to comprehend what you have said about the kingdom. We do not feel able to begin this work until you have given us further instruction. I have come to ask you to join us in the garden and help us understand the meaning of your words." And Jesus went with Andrew to meet with the apostles.
All right.
When he had entered the garden, he gathered the apostles around him and taught them further, saying, "You find it difficult to receive my message because you would build the new teaching directly upon the old. But I declare that you must be reborn. You must start out afresh as little children and be willing to trust my teaching and believe in God. The new gospel of the kingdom cannot be made to conform to that which is. You have wrong ideas of the Son of Man and his mission on earth. But do not make the mistake of thinking that I have come to set aside the law and the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill, to enlarge, to illuminate. I come not to transgress the law, but rather to write these new commandments on the tablets of your hearts."
Okay, notice here that he mentions he hasn't come to set the original law aside, but to add to it, to make it more clear to them what it should be. Right? Okay. "I demand of you a righteousness that shall exceed the righteousness of those who seek to obtain the Father's favor by almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. If you would enter the kingdom, you must have a righteousness that consists in love, mercy, and truth, the sincere desire to do the will of my Father in heaven." So he's saying that the price of this is to do the will of God.
Then said Simon Peter, "Master, if you have a new commandment, we would hear it. Reveal the new way to us." Jesus answered Peter and said, "You have heard it said by those who teach the law, you shall not kill, that whosoever kills shall be subject to judgment. But I look beyond the act to uncover the motive. I declare to you that everyone who is angry with his brother is in danger of condemnation. He who nurses hatred in his heart and plans vengeance in his mind stands in danger of judgment. You must judge your fellows by their deeds. The Father in heaven judges them by the intent."
So he says there's a new standard. The angels and the Father help judge us by what our motives are rather than our acts.
"You have heard the teachers of the law say, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that every man who looks upon a woman with intent to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. You can only judge men by their acts, but my Father looks into the hearts of his children, and in mercy judges them in accordance with their intents and real desires."
Jesus was minded to go on discussing the other commandments when James Zebedee interrupted him, asking, "Master, what shall we teach the people regarding divorcement? Shall we allow a man to divorce his wife as Moses has directed?" And when Jesus heard this question, he said, "I have not come to legislate but to enlighten. I have come not to reform the kingdom of this world, but rather to establish the kingdom of heaven. It is not the will of the Father that I should yield to the temptation to teach you rules of government trade, or social behavior, which while they may be good for today, would be far from suitable for the society of another age. I am on earth solely to conform the minds, comfort the minds, liberate the spirits, and save the souls of men. But I will say concerning this question of divorcement that while Moses looked with favor upon such things, it was not so in the days of Adam in the garden. So he's basically saying that it was not acceptable in a different age, right?
After the apostles had talked among themselves for a short time, Jesus went on to say, always must you recognize the two viewpoints of all mortal conduct, the human and the divine, the ways of the flesh and the ways of the spirit, the estimate of time and the viewpoint of eternity. And though the 12 could not comprehend all that he taught them, they were truly helped by this instruction.
And then said Jesus, but you will stumble over my teaching because you are wont to interpret my message literally. You are slow to discern the spirit of my teaching. Again must you remember that you are my messengers. You are beholden to live your lives as I have in spirit lived mine. You are my personal representatives. But do not err in expecting all men to live as you do in every particular. Also must you remember that I have sheep not of this flock, and that I am beholden to them also, and to the end that I must provide for them the pattern of doing the will of God, while living the life of the mortal nature.
So he was living this life for all planets, right, that we're watching on in the future. Then asked Nathanael, Master, shall we give no place to justice? The law of Moses says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What shall we say? And Jesus answered, you shall return good for evil. My messenger must not strive with men, but be gentle toward all. Measure for measure shall not be your rule. The rulers of men may have such laws, but not so in the kingdom. Mercy always shall determine your judgments and love your conduct. And if these are hard sayings, you can even now turn back. But if you find the requirements of apostleship too hard, you may return to the less rigorous pathways of discipleship. He's talking about these are rules just for the apostles, not for the disciples. Right?
On hearing these startling words, the apostles drew apart by themselves for a while, but they soon returned, and Peter said, Master, we would go on with you. Not one of us would turn back. We are fully prepared to pay the extra price. We will drink the cup. We would be apostles, not merely disciples.
When Jesus heard this, he said, be willing then to take your responsibilities and follow me. Do your good deeds in secret. When you give alms, let not the left hand know what the right hand does. And when you pray, go apart by yourselves, and use not vain repetitions in meaningless phrases. Always remember that the Father knows what you need even before you ask him. And be not given to fasting with a sad countenance to be seen by men. As my chosen apostles, now set apart for the service of the kingdom, lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth, but by your unselfish service lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. For where your treasures are, there will your heart be also.
Roger, let me ask a question. The end of the last paragraph, we would be apostles, not merely disciples. You want to define the difference between apostles and disciples?
Yeah, an apostle dedicates his whole existence to doing the will of God and serving God, Jesus, right? Disciples are followers or believers in God and try to do the will of God as much as they can in their lives, but they're not considered to give up all, if required, to follow after Jesus. You know, they can maintain their own households and that sort of stuff. By being apostles, these men agree to give up all, including all their belongings, their personal life, everything, to serve God. And disciples are not required to do that. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You.
Me? Oh.
You.
Sorry. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is generous, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is selfish, the whole body will be filled with darkness. If the very light which is in you is turned to darkness, how great is that darkness?
And then Thomas asked Jesus if they should continue having everything in common. Said the Master, "Yes, my brethren, I would that we should live together as one understanding family. You are entrusted with a great work, and I crave your undivided service. You know that it has been well said, no man can serve two masters. You cannot sincerely worship God and at the same time wholeheartedly serve Mammon. Having now enlisted unreservedly in the work of the kingdom, be not anxious for your lives, much less be concerned with what you shall eat or what you shall drink, nor yet for your bodies, what clothing you shall wear. Already have you learned that willing hands and earnest hearts shall not go hungry. And now, when you prepare to devote all of your energies to the work of the kingdom, be assured that the Father will not be unmindful of your needs. Seek first the kingdom of God, and when you have found entrance thereto, all things needful shall be added to you, but not therefore unduly anxious. Be not therefore unduly anxious for the morrow. Sufficient for the day is the trouble thereof.
So they were to go about with faith, right? They should not worry about what they should drink, eat, or wear, or whether they had a place to stay, because God will provide for his apostles. If you devote your whole life for the doing of the will of God, all things will work out, and we should not worry about it, right? Right.
When Jesus saw they were disposed to stay up all night to ask questions, he said to them, "My brethren, you are earthen vessels. It is best for you to go to your rest so as to be ready for the morrow's work." But sleep had departed from their eyes. Peter ventured to request of his master that, "I have just a little private talk with you. Not that I would have secrets from my brethren, but I have a troubled spirit, and if perchance I should deserve a rebuke from my master, I could the better endure it alone with you." And Jesus said, "Come with me, Peter," leading the way into the house. When Peter returned from the presence of his master, much cheered and greatly encouraged, James decided to go in to talk with Jesus. And so on through the early hours of the morning, the other apostles went in one by one to talk with the master. When they had all held personal conferences with him, save the twins, who had fallen asleep, Andrew went in to Jesus and said, "Master, the twins have fallen asleep in the garden by the fire. Shall I arouse them to inquire if they would also talk with you?" And Jesus smilingly said to Andrew, "They do well, trouble them not." And now the night was passing, the light of another day was dawning.
The week following the ordination. After a few hours of sleep, when the 12 were assembled for a late breakfast with Jesus, he said, "Now you must begin your work of preaching the glad tidings and instructing believers. Make ready and go to Jerusalem." After Jesus had spoken, Thomas mustered up the courage to say, "I know, Master, that we should be ready to enter upon the work, but I fear we are not yet able to accomplish this great undertaking. Would you consent for us to stay hereabouts for a few days more before we begin the work of the kingdom?" And when Jesus saw that all his apostles were possessed by this same fear, he said, "It shall be as you have requested. We shall remain here over the Sabbath day." So all of them were afraid, weren't they? They were starting out something totally new, and they didn't feel like they were totally prepared for it yet.
For weeks and weeks, small groups of earnest truth seekers, together with curious spectators, had been coming to Bethsaida to see Jesus. Already word about him had spread over the countryside. Inquiring groups had come from cities as far away as Tyre, Sidon, Damascus, Caesarea, and Jerusalem. Heretofore, Jesus had greeted these people and taught them concerning the kingdom. But the Master now turned this work over to the 12. Andrew would select one of the apostles and assign him to a group of visitors. Then sometimes all 12 of them were so engaged.
So they started preaching right away to the groups, right?
For 2 days they worked, teaching by day and holding private conferences late into the night. On the third day, Jesus visited with Zebedee and Salome, while he sent his apostles off to go fishing, to seek carefree change, or perchance visit your families. On Thursday they returned for 3 more days of teaching.
During the week of rehearsing, Jesus many times repeated to his apostles the two great motives of his post-baptismal mission on earth. 1, to reveal the Father to man. 2, to lead man to become Son conscious, to faith realize that they are the children of the Most High.
1 week of this varied experience did much for the 12. Some even became over self-confident. At the last conference, the night after the Sabbath, Peter and James came to Jesus saying, "We are ready. Let us now go forth and take the kingdom." To which Jesus replied, "May your wisdom equal your zeal and your courage atone for your ignorance."
So he realized they didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
Though the apostles failed to comprehend much of his teaching, they did not fail to grasp the significance of the charmingly beautiful life he lived with them.
Thursday afternoon on the lake. Jesus well knew that his apostles were not fully assimilating his teachings. He decided to give some special instruction to Peter, James, and John, hoping they would be able to clarify the ideas to their associates. He saw that while some features of the idea of the spiritual kingdom were being grasped by the 12, they steadfastly persisted in attaching these new spiritual teachings directly into their old and entrenched literal concept of the kingdom of heaven as a restoration of David's throne and the reestablishment of Israel as the temporal power on earth. Accordingly, on Thursday, after Jesus went out from the shore in a boat with Peter, James, and John to talk over the affairs of the kingdom. This was a 4 hours teaching conference embracing scores of questions and answers, and may most profitably be put to this record by reorganizing the summary of this momentous afternoon as it is given by Simon Peter to his brother Andrew the following morning. Before I move off of this, I want to comment too. This is the problem with the Urantia Book too. We are trying many times to take the new teachings of the Urantia Book and put them on top of the old teachings of Christianity, and we cannot do that. We need to take the new teachings as they stand and add to that which is good from the old teachings, right? It does not completely jive, and I want to point that out. All right. Millie, would you take the next
1. Doing the Father's will. Jesus' teaching to trust in the overcare of the Heavenly Father was not a blind and passive fatalism. He quoted with approval on this afternoon an old Hebrew saying, "He who will not work shall not eat." He pointed to his own experience as sufficient commentary on his teachings. His precepts about trusting the Father must not be adjudged by the social or economic conditions of modern times or any other age. His instruction embraces the ideal principle of living near God in all ages and on all worlds.
So what's he saying here? He's saying we must make effort of ourselves to provide for ourselves, don't we? And that's not only in our everyday lives, but our spiritual lives as well. We have to work to reap the benefits, right? No one can be slothful. All right.
Jesus made clear to the three the difference between the requirements of apostleship and discipleship. And even then he did not forbid the exercise of prudence and foresight by the 12. What he preached against was not forethought, but anxiety and worry. He taught the active and alert submission to God's will. In answer to many of their questions regarding frugality and thriftiness, he simply called attention to his life as a carpenter, boatmaker, and fisherman, and to his careful organization of the 12. He sought to make it clear that the world is not to be regarded as an enemy, that the circumstances of life constitute a divine dispensation working along with the children of God.
Jesus had great difficulty in getting them to understand his personal practice of non-resistance. He absolutely refused to defend himself, and it appeared to the apostle that he would be pleased if they would pursue the same policy. He taught them not to resist evil, not to combat injustice or injury, but he did but he did not teach passive tolerance of wrongdoing. He made it plain on this afternoon that he approved of the social punishment of evildoers and criminals, and that the civil government must sometimes employ force for the maintenance of social order and then the execution of justice. So we cannot let evildoers and criminals walk over us, right?
He never ceased to warn his disciples against the evil practice of retaliation. He made no allowance for revenge, the idea of getting even. He deplored the holding of grudges. He disallowed the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He discountenanced the whole concept of private and personal revenge, assigning these matters to civil government on the one hand, and to the judgment of God on the other. He made it clear to the three that his teachings applied to the individual, not the state. He summarized his instructions up to that time regarding these matters as: love your enemies, remember the mortal claims of human brotherhood, the futility of evil, a wrong is not righted by vengeance. Do not make the mistake of fighting evil with its own weapons. Have faith, confidence in the eventual triumph of divine justice and eternal goodness.
2. Political attitude. He cautioned his apostles to be discreet in their remarks concerning the strained relations then existing between the Jewish people and the Roman government. He forbade them to become in any way embroiled in these difficulties. He was always careful to avoid the political snares of his enemies, ever making reply, "Render to Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and to God the things which are God's." He refused to have his attention diverted from his mission of establishing a new way of salvation. He would not permit himself to be concerned about anything else. In his personal life, he was always duly observant to all civil laws and regulations. In all his public teachings, he ignored the civil, social, and economic realms. He told the three apostles that he was concerned only with the principles of man's inner and personal spiritual life.
Nothing else, right? Just the spiritual life. Jesus was not, therefore, a political reformer. He did not come to reorganize the world. Even if he had done this, it would have been applicable only to that day and generation. Nevertheless, he did show man the best way of living, and no generation is exempt from the labor of discovering how best to adapt Jesus' life to its own problems. But never make the mistake of identifying Jesus' teachings with any political or economic theory, with any social or industrial system. Because they're all imperfect, right? All right. Billy.
Social attitude, number 3. The Jewish rabbis had long debated the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus came presenting the idea of active and spontaneous kindness, a love of one's fellow man, so genuine that it expanded the neighborhood to include the whole world, thereby making all men one's neighbors. But with all this, Jesus was interested only in the individual, not the mass. Jesus was not a sociologist, but he did labor to break down all forms of selfish isolation. He taught pure sympathy, compassion. Michael of Nebadon is a mercy-dominated son, compassion in his very nature.
The Master did not say that men should never entertain their friends at meat, but he did say that his followers should make feast for the poor and the unfortunate. Jesus had a firm sense of justice, but it was always tempered with mercy. He did not teach his apostles that they were to be imposed upon by social parasites or professional alms seekers. The nearest he came to making sociological pronouncements was to say, "Judge not, that you be not judged."
He made it clear that indiscriminate kindness may be blind from many social evils. That's an interesting statement. The following day, Jesus definitely instructed Judas that no apostolic funds were to be given out as alms except upon his request or upon the joint petition of two of the apostles. In all these matters, it was the practice of Jesus always to say, "Be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves." It seemed to be his purpose in all social situations to teach patience, tolerance, and forgiveness. We got a lot of social parasites, don't we? And he said,
Is that what we're talking about, the indiscriminate?
yes, that's right. When we have parasites on the world that will not do anything for themselves, that's why he was so adamant about not giving out alms unless they were justly deserved, right? There's a difference between being kind and tolerance, and having tolerance with people, and being taken advantage of. And many people in this world will take advantage of you if you let them, right? All right.
The family occupied the very center of Jesus' philosophy of life, here and hereafter. He based his teachings about God on the family, while he sought to correct the Jewish tendency to over-honor ancestors. He exalted family life as the highest human duty, but made it plain that family relationships must not interfere with religious obligations. He called attention to the fact that the family is a temporal institution, that it does not survive death. Jesus did not hesitate to give up his family when the family ran counter to the Father's will. He taught the new and larger brotherhood of man, the sons of God. In Jesus' time, divorce practices were lax in Palestine and throughout the Roman Empire. He repeatedly refused to lay down the laws regarding marriage and divorce, but many of Jesus' early followers had strong opinions on divorce and did not hesitate to attribute them to him. All of the New Testament writers held these more stringent and advanced ideas about divorce, except John Mark.
So many things Jesus was attributed to, he didn't say that it wasn't. All right.
4. Economic attitude. Jesus worked, lived, and traded in the world as he found it. He was not an economic reformer, although he did frequently call attention to the injustice of the unequal distribution of wealth. But he did not offer any suggestions by way of remedy. He made it plain to the three that while his apostles were not to rule property, he was not preaching against wealth and property, merely its unequal and unfair distribution. He recognized the need for social justice and industrial fairness, but he offered no rules for their attainment.
Left these things to work out for us, didn't he? He never taught his followers to avoid earthly possessions, only his 12 apostles. Luke the physician was a strong believer in social equality, and he did much to interpret Jesus' sayings in harmony with his personal beliefs. Jesus never personally directed his followers to adopt a communal mode of life. He made no pronouncement of any sort regarding such matters.
Jesus frequently warned his listeners against covetousness, declaring that a man's happiness consists not in the abundance of his material possessions. He constantly reiterated, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" He made no direct attack on the possession of property, but he did insist that it is eternally essential that spiritual values come first. In his later teachings, he sought to correct many erroneous Urantia views of life by narrating numerous parables, which he presented in the course of his public ministry. Jesus never intended to formulate economic theories. He well knew that each age must evolve in its own remedies for existing troubles. And if Jesus were on earth today, living his life in the flesh, he would be a great disappointment to the majority of good men and women, for the simple reason that he would not take sides in present-day political, social, or economic disputes. He would remain grandly aloof while teaching you how to perfect your inner spiritual life so as to render you manyfold more competent to attack the solutions of your purely human problems.
So the other thing he left for us to figure out on our own, didn't he? All right.
Jesus would make all men godlike and then stand by sympathetically while these sons of God solved their own political, social, and economic problems. It was not wealth that he denounced, but what wealth does to the majority of its devotees. On this Thursday afternoon, Jesus first told his associates that it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Personal religion, you as did his apostles, should the better understand Jesus' teachings by his life. He lived a perfected life on Urantia, and his unique teachings can only be understood when that life is visualized in its immediate background. It is his life and not his lessons to the 12 or his sermons to the multitudes that will assist most by revealing the Father's divine character and loving personality.
Here was giving these big ones. Jesus did not attack the teachings of the Hebrew prophets or the Greek moralists. The Master recognized the many good things which these great teachers stood for, but he had come down to earth to teach something additional, the voluntary conformity of man's will to God's will. Jesus did not want simply to produce a religious man, a mortal wholly occupied with religious feelings and actuated only by spiritual impulses. Could you have but one look at him, you would have known that Jesus was a real man of great experience in the things of this world. The teachings of Jesus in this respect have been grossly perverted and much misrepresented all down through the centuries of the Christian era. You have also held perverted ideas about the Master's meekness and humility. What he aimed at in his life appears to have been a superb self-respect. He only advised man to humble himself that he might become truly exalted. What he really aimed at was true humility toward God. He placed great value upon sincerity, a pure heart. Fidelity was a cardinal virtue in his estimate of character, while courage was the very heart of his teachings. Fear not was his watchword, and patient endurance his ideal of strength and character. The teachings of Jesus constitute a religion of valor, courage, and heroism, and this is just why he chose as his personal representatives 12 commonplace men, the majority of whom were rugged, virile, and manly fishermen.
Jesus had little to say about the social vices of his day. Seldom did he make reference to moral delinquency. He was a positive teacher of true virtue. He studiously avoided the negative method of imparting instruction. He refused to advertise evil. He was not even a moral reformer. He well knew and so taught his apostles that the sensual urges of mankind are not suppressed by either religious rebuke or legal prohibitions. His few denunciations were largely directed against pride, cruelty, oppression, and hypocrisy.
Jesus did not vehemently denounce even the Pharisees, as did John. He knew many of the scribes and Pharisees were honest of heart. He understood their enslaved bondage to religious tradition. Jesus laid great emphasis on first making the tree good. He impressed the three that he valued the whole life, not just certain few special virtues.
The one thing which John gained from this day's teaching was that the heart of Jesus' religion consisted in the acquirement of a compassionate character coupled with a personality motivated to do the will of the Father in heaven.
Always comes back to the will of the Father in heaven, doesn't it?
Peter grasped the idea that the gospel that they were about to proclaim was really a fresh beginning for the whole human race. He conveyed this impression subsequently to Paul, who formulated therefrom his doctrine of Christ as the second Adam.
James grasped the thrilling truth that Jesus wanted his children to live on earth, to live as though they were already citizens of the completed heavenly kingdom.
Jesus knew men were different, and he so taught his apostles. He constantly exhorted them to refrain from trying to mold the disciples and believers according to some set pattern. He sought to allow each soul to develop in its own way. a perfecting and separate individual before God. In answer to one of Peter's many questions, the Master said, I want to set men free so that they can start out afresh as little children upon a new and better life. Jesus always insisted that true goodness must be unconscious in bestowing charity, not allowing the left hand know what the right hand does.
The three apostles, sorry.
The three apostles were shocked this afternoon when they realized that their master's religion made no provision for spiritual self-examination. All religions before and after the times of Jesus, even Christianity, carefully provide for conscientious self-examination, but not so with the religion of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus' philosophy of life is without religious introspection. The carpenter's son never taught character building, he taught character growth, declaring that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. But Jesus said nothing which would prescribe self-analysis as a prevention of conceited egotism.
So it's not about self, right? The right to enter the kingdom is conditioned by faith and personal belief. The cost of remaining in the progressive descent of the kingdom is the pearl of great price, in order to possess which a man sells all that he has.
The teachings of Jesus is a religion for everybody, not alone for weaklings and slaves. His religion never became crystallized during his day into creeds and theological laws. He left not a line of writing behind him. His life and teachings were bequeathed the universe as an inspirational and idealistic inheritance suitable for the spiritual guidance and moral instruction of all ages on all worlds. And even today, Jesus' teachings stand apart from all religions as such, albeit it is the living hope of every one of them.
Jesus did not teach his apostles that religion is man's only earthly pursuit. That was the Jewish idea of serving God. But he did insist that religion was the exclusive business of the 12. Jesus taught nothing to deter his believers from the pursuit of genuine culture. He only detracted from the tradition-bound religious schools of Jerusalem. He was liberal, big-hearted, learned, and tolerant. Self-conscious piety had no place in his philosophy of righteous living.
The Master offered no solutions for the non-religious problems of his own age, nor for any subsequent age. Jesus wished to develop spiritual insight into eternal realities and to stimulate initiative in the originality of living. He concerned himself exclusively with the underlying and permanent spiritual needs of the human race. He revealed a goodness equal to God. He exalted love, truth, beauty, and goodness as the divine ideal and the eternal reality.
The Master came to create in man a new spirit, a new will, to impart a new capacity for knowing the truth, experiencing compassion, and choosing goodness, the will to be in harmony with God's will, coupled with the eternal age to become perfect, the eternal urge to become perfect, even as the Father in heaven is perfect.
9. The day of consecration. Excuse me. The next Sabbath day Jesus devoted to his apostles, journeying back to the highland where he had ordained them. And there, after a long and beautifully touching personal message of encouragement, he engaged in the solemn act of the consecration of the 12. This Sabbath afternoon Jesus assembled the apostles around him on the hillside and gave them into the hands of his heavenly Father in preparation for the day when he would be compelled to leave them alone in the world. This was no new teaching on this occasion, just visiting and communion.
Jesus reviewed many features of the ordination sermon delivered on the same spot, and then calling them before him one by one, he commissioned them to go forth in the world as his representatives. The Master's consecration charge was, go into all the world and preach the glad tidings of the kingdom, liberate spiritual captives, comfort the oppressed, and minister to the afflicted. Freely give you have received, freely you have received, freely give.
Jesus advised them to take neither money nor extra clothing, saying, "The laborer is worthy of his hire." And finally he said, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be you therefore as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. But take heed, for your enemies will bring you up before their councils, while in their synagogues they will castigate you. Before governors and rulers you will be brought because you believe in this gospel, and your very testimony shall be a witness for me to them. And when they lead you to judgment, be not anxious about what you shall say, for the Spirit of my Father indwells you and will at such a time speak through you. Some of you will be put to death, and before you establish the kingdom on earth, you will be hated by many peoples because of this gospel. But fear not, I will be with you, and my Spirit shall go before you into all the world, and my Father's presence will abide with you while you go first to the Jews, then to the Gentiles."
So he already knew what had to come, had to face to come, right?
And when they came down from the mountain, they journeyed back to their home in Zebedee's house.
10. The evening after the consecration. That evening, while teaching in the house, for it had begun to rain, Jesus talked at great length, trying to show the 12 that what they must be, not what they must do. They knew only a religion that imposed the doing of certain things as the means of attaining righteousness, salvation. But Jesus would reiterate, in the kingdom you must be righteous in order to do the work. Many times did he repeat, "Be you therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Well, all the while was the Master explaining to his bewildered apostles that the salvation which he had come to bring to the world was to be had only by believing, by simple and sincere faith. Said Jesus, "John preached a baptism of repentance, sorrow for the old way of living. You are to proclaim the baptism of fellowship with God. Preach repentance to those who stand in need of such teaching. But to those already seeking sincere entrance into the kingdom, open the doors wide and bid them enter into the joyous fellowship of the sons of God." And it was a difficult task to persuade these Galilean fishermen that in the kingdom being righteous by faith must precede doing righteousness in the daily life of the mortals of the earth.
Another great handicap in this work of teaching the 12 was their tendency to take highly idealistic and spiritual principles of religious truth and remake them into complete rules of personal conduct.
Concrete rules, Millie.
Make them into concrete rules of personal conduct. Jesus would present to them the beautiful spirit of the soul's attitude, but they insisted on translating such teachings into rules of personal behavior. Many times, when they did make sure to remember what the Master said, they were almost certain to forget what he did not say. But they slowly assimilated his teachings because Jesus was all that he taught. What they could not gain from his verbal instruction, they gradually acquired from living with him.
So he lived this life himself daily, right?
It was not apparent to the apostles that their Master was engaged in living a life of spiritual inspiration for every person of every age on every world of a far-flung universe. Notwithstanding what Jesus told them from time to time, the apostles did not grasp the idea that he was doing a work on this world, but for all other worlds in his vast creation. Jesus lived his earth life on Urantia, not to set a personal example of mortal living for the men and women of this world, but rather to create a high spiritual and inspirational ideal for all mortal beings on all worlds.
For all types of beings, right? The same evening, Thomas asked Jesus, "Master, you say that we must come as little children before we can gain entrance into the Father's kingdom, and yet you have warned us not to be deceived by false prophets, nor become guilty of casting our pearls before swine. Now I am honestly puzzled. I cannot understand your teaching." Jesus replied to Thomas, "How long shall I bear with you? ever you insist on making literal all that I teach. When I asked you to become as little children as the price of entering the kingdom, I referred not to ease of deception, mere willingness to believe, nor to quickness to trust pleasing strangers. What I did desire you should gather from this instruction was the child-father relationship. You are the child, and it is your Father's kingdom you seek to enter. There is a present that natural affection between every normal child and its father, which ensures an understanding and loving relationship, and which forever precludes all disposition to bargain for the Father's love and mercy. And the gospel you are going forth to preach has to do with the salvation growing out of the faith relationship of this very and eternal child-father relationship. Now y'all keep in mind, he's talking about a perfect relationship between a child and father. He's not talking about the relationship that many mortals have with their father, right? Because we have very unperfect relationships, many of us, with our fathers. All right? Millie.
The one characteristic of Jesus' teaching was that the morality of his philosophy originated in the personal relation of the individual to God, this very child-father relationship. Jesus placed emphasis on the individual, not on the race or the nation. While eating supper, Jesus had the talk with Matthew in which he explained that the morality of any act is determined by the individual's motive. Jesus' morality was always positive. The golden rule, as restated by Jesus, demands active social contact. The older negative rule could be obeyed in isolation. Jesus stripped morality of all rules and ceremonies and elevated it to majestic levels of spiritual thinking and truly righteous living.
This new religion of Jesus was not without its practical implications, but whatever of practical, political, social, or economic value there is to be found in his teaching is the natural outworking of his inner experience of the soul, as it manifests the fruits of the Spirit in the spontaneous daily ministry of genuine personal religious experience.
After Jesus and Matthew had finished talking, Simon Zelotes asked, "But Master, are all men the sons of God?" And Jesus answered, "Yes, Simon, all men are the sons of God, and that is the good news you are going to proclaim." But the apostles could not grasp such doctrine. It was a new, strange, and startling announcement, and it was because of his desire to impress this truth upon them that Jesus taught his followers to treat all men as their brothers.
In response to a question asked by Andrew, the Master made it clear that the morality of his teaching was inseparable from the religion of his living. He taught morality not from the nature of man, but from the relation of man to God.
John asked Jesus, "Master, what is the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus answered, "The kingdom of heaven consists in these three essentials. First, recognition of the fact of the sovereignty of God. Second, belief in the truth of sonship of God. And third, faith in the effectiveness of the supreme human desire to do the will of God, to be like God. And this is the good news of the gospel, that by faith every mortal may have all these essentials of salvation."
That's the whole ball of wax right there. Right? And now the week of waiting was over, and they prepared to depart on the morrow for Jerusalem. And that brings us to paper 141, beginning the public work. Now this one we will not do till the 1st of January, because we're going to be on sabbatical to move the house for a little bit of time here. So let's say a closing prayer, and we'll stop the video. Billy, would you like to pray for us today?
Yes. Thank you, Father, for bringing us together today so we can understand a little more about these 12 men that Jesus chose to teach your new gospel. We ask that we take it in our hearts and use it in our daily lives, that we may also be disciples of Jesus. Jesus of Nebadon, Christ Michael. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us. Please come see us again. God bless you.